Welcome everyone. I am coming to you from Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. My name is Juan Carlos Lopez. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning at the Maple League of Universities, and I work at Acadia University in Waltham, Nova Scotia. I make this acknowledgement as my compromise to listen and listen and listen and then listen some more so that I can learn the truth. And in learning the truth, is a way of committing to doing the work for decolonization and reconciliation in our country. And I do that following the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. I do that as an immigrant and a settler in these lands. I also would like to acknowledge that in this area of these lands, there have been several waves of people of African descent who came in here. The oldest record, and again record, it's like 400 years ago. So and I also want to listen and learn so that we move towards a better future for everyone. So with that, really happy today to host Dr. Kim Potowski. She's coming from the University of Illinois in Chicago. And what I'm going to do is I'm gonna let Kim introduce herself, and then we'll take it from there. So does that work, Kim?
Yes, that works. That's wonderful. I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen. And then that way I can share my PowerPoint here, which, as you can see, is titled No Child Left Monolingual. So I want to thank everybody for coming here, electronically. And I want to especially thank Juan Carlos Lopez for inviting me and your whole group, your whole staff. I was reading a little bit about the Maple League of Universities. And yeah, so I'm Kim Potowski. I've been at the University of Illinois at Chicago since 1999. I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and I've like to share some ideas with you about I guess I'll call it just monolingualism and multilingualism, right? And how these two things sort of come about. And my sense is that we all here are in favor of promoting various forms of multilingualism, right? So I'm not sure who among the crowd here may be teaching English as a new language. Maybe some of you do or know people who do. Maybe some of you teach English as a new language to adults, to high school students, or to K-8 students. Maybe some of you are more involved in the teaching of a non-English language. Particularly those of you who teach Spanish. I do have a couple of pieces of data related to Spanish, a couple of jokes here and there that if I apologize if you don't know Spanish, you may not think they're funny, but the talk will be in English. Anyway, some of you may be engaged in the teaching of a non-English language at different age ranges. Maybe there is something else. What else? I don't know what else you may all be engaged in. But I think it's probably safe to say that we're all interested in promoting bilingualism or even multilingualism, right? And that's sort of what's going on here with my little bicycle idea, right? If each wheel is a language, right? People who have a bicycle have two, right? And I think we would all agree that a bicycle is a more useful vehicle, right? For moving around, right? Certainly more so than a unicycle if you've only got the one language. But I'd like to just sort of back up for a moment and ask about like the whole world. Okay, so this entire planet, how common is it to be bilingual? Now, when I say bilingual, let's try to keep in mind it could be referring to multilingualism, right? It could be referring to more than one language. How common is it around the world? Well, in order to do that, let's first think about how many people are there on the planet running around. What's your back of the envelope guess? Maybe you can type in the chat, and then maybe Juan Carlos, you can tell me the first 2 or 3 guesses that people write. How many people are there on the planet right now? It's a little shocking, actually. Maybe some of you are a little too shocked to write it. Sorry, you're muted.
8 billion.
Yes, that's exactly right. 8 billion with a B.
Billion. Yeah. 4 billion, somebody asked. No, it's 8 billion, right?
It's a little more than that. There is actually, I go to this thing, it's called the Worldometer. It's online. And you can see the numbers tick, 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 right? It's a very interesting little existential experience to see that happening. And actually, last time I looked at the Worldometer was in November, and you can see that we just keep increasing our numbers here. But anyway, so of the 8 billion people running around, what proportion of them, what percent would you say are multilingual? Again, Juan Carlos, if you could tell me the first 2 or 3 numbers that people type, what percent do you think of all humans are bilingual or multilingual?
50%, the first guess. 23%, a total guess. 85, 80, 35, 70, 75.
Wow. All over the place. And that's usually what happens when I ask this question. All over the place, everywhere from 20 to 106, right? You know, people just sort of guess all over the place. And I think part of the reason is that we have such a wide range of guesses, even among highly educated people, is because we don't know. We don't actually know. A ciencia cierta, like as a science, like what percent of the world's population is multilingual. But we do have people like Francois Grosjean, who sort of dedicated his life to looking at this, and he says it's between 50 to 70. Okay, so I think it's being somewhat conservative if we say, okay, we're going to go right down the middle, and we're going to say it's 60. Okay, so a couple times during this talk, I'm going to say, okay, y'all, remember I said what percent of this planet is multilingual? And you're all going to say 60, and I'm going to hear you right through Zoom. Okay, 60% of humans are bilingual or multilingual. Great. Okay. So that means that most of the planet is getting around like this in my little analogy, right? On a bicycle, and only 40% of folks are, I'll say, stuck with, right? Only speak one language. Okay. Now, I hope you will forgive me. My data and my positionality, right, is from the United States. It's where I live. It's where I work. I would love to know more and learn more about Canada. And maybe in the Q&A afterwards, you guys can share some data with me about Canada. And here and there, I'll try to make reference to it where it's relevant. But so here we go. I like to think of bilingualism as this, and probably most of you do too. But you're probably also aware that a lot of people out there, there's this folk idea that somehow one language is going to contaminate the other, or one interferes with the other, or it's somehow problematic. A lot of people position bilingualism as somehow suspect or problematic, when really we know that these languages nurture and support and help each other. We all know about the benefits of bilingualism, right? But unfortunately, we encounter a lot of resistance. Now, here's what I'm going to speak about, and this is embarrassing, y'all. Okay, this is embarrassing, speaking about my country here. Not for a number of different reasons. Okay, let's start with this. If you had to guess about the United States, your neighbors here, right down south here, hello, what proportion of us do you think report speaking a language other than English in the home? Now, you'll notice I didn't say what percent of people in the United States are bilingual. I'll come back to why I am careful about my wording in just a minute. But for now, let's see what you would guess. And maybe, Juan Carlos, you can tell me how many people are going to say 0 to 25. Maybe you could raise your hand, or you could say yes, 0 to 25.
25,
do you think that
20, 35, 51 to 75, 0
okay.
to 25, 40, 26 to 50, 0 to 25.
Okay. Once again, all over the map.
Yeah.
Okay. So once again, we have a wide range of guesses. And guess what? Once again, we don't know. I just came here to tell you stuff we don't know, I guess, really. No, we don't have an exact measure. And here's part of the reason why we don't have an exact measure, because the US Census asks the following. Do you speak a language other than English at home? What if you say no? I don't speak a language other than English at home. That doesn't mean that you're monolingual, does it? Maybe you speak Italian, but you only speak it at work. You don't speak it at home. Okay. Furthermore, if you say, yes, I speak a language other than English at home, and then you write in here that you speak Tagalog, and then over here, how well do you speak English? And you say not at all. Okay. That doesn't mean that you're monolingual in Tagalog, does it? You might be bilingual in Tagalog and Gujarati, right? So what I'm trying to say is we don't have a very good measure of bilingualism in the United States, but this is the best we got. Okay. So here we go. Drum roll, please. Here is the percent of people who say they speak a language other than English in the home. It was 21.6. Okay, so no cheating. How many of you got it right? How many of you said 0 to 25? You were correct. But I'm not going to applaud and be all happy, right? Because I'm not happy about this answer, right? And I hope you're not happy either. I think this is way too low, right? So if you think about it, in the United States, we look like this. We're 20% of us, at least if we're going to do our best to extrapolate from the data I just showed you, are bilingual or monolingual or multilingual. 80% of this country, or close to it, is monolingual in English, right? Whereas the rest of the world, do you see how different this is? Now, if I had to guess, and maybe in the Q&A you can let me know if you think I'm correct, I might guess that in Canada it's a little bit higher, that you're not as monolingual as we are. And we all sort of know some of the reasons for that. We know about your French language. I was just reading something about your French language. Something just came out in Language Magazine. Maybe you saw it, Juan Carlos. I'll go take a look at it later. But, you know, and you all tend to be a lot more open to the value of multilingualism and your what you call community languages, where we call them heritage languages, et cetera. But anyway, my point is, and I already told you I'm going to be mostly focusing on the US. We are super monolingual, and the world tends towards more multilingual, right? Okay. Here you can see the languages that are spoken here in the US, aside from English. Obviously, Spanish is the first, but we've got a fair number of other languages. And in Chicago in particular, we have a nice mix of all kinds of different languages. Polish, I'm told, we are the second largest Polish speaking city, second largest in the world outside of Warsaw. It's Chicago. And in fact, with a last name like mine, which is not Polish, by the way, it was Lithuanian, people walk up to me and start talking to me in Polish with some frequency, right? And I get a good deal at my mechanic because he's Polish. And so, you know, you have advantages there. But anyway, 80% of people here are monolingual in English. And to the extent that Canada may be similar, then these data that I'm going to talk about may have some relevance for you. We are just not as exposed to multilingualism, to children who code switch, who mix languages, as the rest of the world is. And this leads to all kinds of problems, okay? Your social media probably blows up just like mine does with the benefits of bilingualism. We know, those of us who are in this field, we know bilingualism has benefits. We know speaking two languages improves certain functions of the brain and cognitive skills. Cognitive benefits of bilingualism, superior skills of bilingual, why bilinguals are smarter, we dress better, we're sexier, we get invited to more parties, right? On a more serious note, we know that the average age of onset of dementia is delayed among bilinguals. They're not exactly sure why, but they say it's an average of 4 years, as much as 10 years later. All these benefits to bilingualism. And yet, here in the US, we hear from a lot of people, some of them, let's face it, may be, you know, racist, xenophobic, etc. Some of them are very well-intended people who will give advice like this. They will say, oh, you better stop speaking X to your children, okay? I had a PhD student who came to me one day and said, Profesora, I took my daughter to her pediatrician, and the pediatrician told me that I should stop speaking Spanish to my child. And wow, that's still happening, right? So, you know, I composed a letter to the pediatrician along the lines of, you know, look, if you're not a linguist, and I'm going to assume you're not, because you're giving very bad linguistic advice, you know, you should stay in your lane, right? Don't give linguistic advice. I don't give anybody gastrointestinal advice, nor do I give anybody advice about their roof or about their car engine. Okay. Unfortunately, far too many people will give this bad advice. Now, why might that pediatrician and others be giving this kind of advice? Well, first of all, I believe they are afraid that the child will not learn English as quickly. And don't we all agree? I think everyone here probably agrees. English is extraordinarily important for professional and social success, both in the United States and in Canada. In fact, I don't know anybody who thinks, oh, no, we don't need English. Don't let anybody learn English, right? The question is, how do immigrants and their descendants learn English, but also retain their heritage languages, right? Is there a way we can do this that embraces linguistic diversity? Why does it seem that I'll speak again for the United States, it seems our policy has been one of, well, if you want to come here, sorry, that's the price of admission. You got to leave your language at the door, right? I think we can do better. We can do better, okay? But I get it. when people are concerned that the children won't learn English, that the children will have an accent. And when this comes from parents who they themselves, I see them, they're all, in Chicago and everywhere else, Spanish-speaking parents, very hardworking folks who suffer in many different ways for their own lack of English proficiency, right? We can all completely understand why they would fight for their children. Nobody plays with the lives of their children, right? The last thing they want is for their children to suffer from any perceived lack in their English. So I get it. If they're told by a pediatrician, don't speak Spanish at home to your children, it's going to affect their English, you better believe they're going to follow that advice. Okay, what we need to do is start busting that myth among the pediatricians and among the parents, right? We need to help get them to see certain realities, right? They're also afraid those children will become confused. Now, here's the first point at which I'm going to ask you to see if you remember. What percent of this world, humans in this world, did we say was multilingual? Do you remember? I can hear you. Yes, that is correct. 60%. We said 60% of this planet is multilingual. Let me ask you something. Do you think they're all confused? I mean, is that a logical assumption to say 60% of the planet is like confused cognitively? No. I think it's reasonable to assume that when the majority of a population does something, that it's normal. In fact, isn't that where the word normal comes from? It comes from the word norm. It's what the majority of a population does. The majority of humans are multilingual, right? So I think what's happening, folks get very scared. And again, I can understand why, okay? When children mix languages, right? And probably most of you here already know this is called code switching, right? Linguists have a fancy term for this. We call it code switching, right? We know that it follows natural linguistic patterns, okay? And here's where my Spanish speakers are gonna, the parts of your brain are gonna activate, right? Unfortunately, a lot of folks believe that code switching is random and that it's a mishmash, y de que es señal de que no hablas bien ni el uno ni el otro, when really, para hacerlo bien, you need to have strong levels of syntax in las dos lenguas. If one of your languages is débil, no lo vas a poder hacer. But unfortunately, we hear so many people, I've talked to high school teachers who say, mezclar las lenguas, ¿quién yo? I would never do that. And they're actually doing it as they tell you they're not doing it because it's so stigmatized. It's a very stigmatized behavior. And I think we need to start to end that stigma and realize how beautiful it is, right? Not only is it linguistically super common, again, 60% of the planet, it's also a marker of bilingual identity, right? When students come to me at the university and they sort of have their tail between their legs and they say, Profe, I don't speak Spanish, I speak Spanglish. And they've been sort of bullied their whole lives into thinking that this is somehow bad. And I tell them, Mijo, you should be proud of your Spanglish. It shows that you've got strong levels in both, right? I mean, yes, in our university courses, we're going to read monolingual texts and we're going to practice monolingual writing and monolingual speaking. That's a good goal. Y pulir nuestro español y usar palabras domingueras y todo eso, right? That's a good thing. But there's nothing wrong with the ways that you speak. And the same is true for Arabic-speaking youth who will say that they speak Arabish, right? Or you can hear Chinglish, right? These words are sort of meant to be insults or derogatory when really we need to turn that on its head and consider this something positive, right? And I like to show kids examples of my own kids. When they were little, now they're in the university, but when they were little, they would say things like, yo soy big boy. I don't want paint any más. Yo quiero ver who that niña is. Yo quiero mi own jugo. He didn't want to share his juice with his brother, so he said, yo quiero mi own jugo. And I show this to people to show them that this is completely normal, right? So when my kids were code switching, granted, I have, studies in linguistics, I would run and write it down. And here I am 15 years later sharing it with you, right? But I get it. I think we can all understand why a parent might say, oh my gosh, my kid is confused. I better listen to that pediatrician who told me to stop speaking X at home with my kids, okay? This is what we're up against. This is part of what we are up against, right? Is busting these myths among parents. Bilinguals are not two monolinguals joined at the neck. You do not have a Gujarati speaking head, monolingual head, and an English speaking monolingual head. In the same way that a bicycle is not two unicycles joined with a bunch of duct tape. That is not how bilingualism works, okay? When we are bilingual, we will not typically pass for a monolingual in each of our languages. And you know what? We don't have to. We don't have to pass for monolinguals, two monolinguals joined at the neck. That's not how it works, right? That is measuring bilingualism with a monolingual ruler. And we need to knock that off, okay? We need to think more about the languages being together, as I like to say, juntos pero no revueltos, in our heads, right? Or like this that I mentioned earlier, right? These languages nurture each other underneath. Remember, what percent of this planet is multilingual? That's right, it is 60%. And we need to start understanding and having that be our norm. Mixing languages is a norm, okay? And this is puro chisme, this is gossip, this is not true. Bilingualism does not cause speech delays. I can't tell you how many parents will say, oh, you know, my child has a documented a speech issue, and that's why we stopped speaking Ukrainian at home. And here's the truth. You can stop speaking Ukrainian at home if you want. That is not going to cure that child's speech and hearing issue, okay? That speech and hearing issue is going to be present in one language, two languages, or 46 languages that your child speaks, right? So you just threw the Ukrainian under the bus and did nothing to help that documented issue, right? So the speech pathologist once said to me, I thought it was very funny, I would prefer a kid speak two languages and need two speech and hearing pathology treatments than just to speak one language and need one, right? So I think this is important to keep in mind also. There's something else that happens, and I believe it's happening in Canada too. And this is intergenerational language shift. So I'm going to use Spanish as my example because it's what I work with. If we have a woman like this woman here who immigrates from Mexico, and she's in her 20s, right? And we'll say monolingual in Spanish, right? And let's say her daughter is born and raised here in Chicago, okay? Her daughter very likely will be bilingual. Why? Because she's growing up in a monolingual home with her parents who only speak Spanish, but she's being raised and educated entirely in English, okay? Now, her levels of Spanish can vary. She can be quite strong in Spanish, or she can actually end up not being too strong at all. And that depends on a number of factors. It can depend on the birth order. We know that the first and second children will have stronger Spanish than the subsequent children. Why is that? Why might the first kid have stronger heritage language, Chinese, Gujarati, whatever, than the subsequent children? Well, here's why. The first child, as we said, is raised in a monolingual Spanish-speaking home. But she goes off to school, she learns English, comes back home, and she's now introducing English to her younger siblings. Her younger siblings are not growing up in the same linguistic home that she did. Her home was monolingual in Spanish. Her kid number 3 and kid number 4 are being raised in a much different home, okay? Well, anyway, let's move on. So she grows up and she has her daughter, okay? So this young gal is the granddaughter of this woman who immigrated. My question for you is, do you think this gal will know Spanish? It's very common for her to not have proficiency in Spanish. Unfortunately, I'll show you some data about that in a moment. This is incredibly fast, right? This is a 3-generation language shift. My sense is that this is also quite common in Canada. And here's the other thing I believe. I believe we can do better. I really believe we can do better. I believe that if we have school programs that encourage the development of these heritage languages, I believe that if we can work to eradicate these pernicious myths that bilingualism is damaging, that bilingualism, is going to slow down your English, it causes speech delays, etc., right? I believe that if we can get rid of these negative attitudes about immigrants and their languages, if we can embrace these things, we can do a lot better. Because when I think about it, my in-laws live downstairs from us, and so my kids have a wonderfully close relationship with their grandparents. And maybe some of you do too, or did, right? I had a very close relationship with my 4 grandparents. Can you imagine not being able to speak at all, communicate with your own grandparents? And maybe that has happened to some of you as well. I think that's an avoidable tragedy, honestly. So that's part of what motivates me as well, that we can keep these familial connections. Okay, and now I want to think for a moment, not about the children of people who have arrived to the country speaking another language. I want to think about the little Anglophone kids, the monolingual Anglophone children. As we say very commonly here in Chicago, most Latinos in Chicago are of Mexican origin, and I lived for years and years in Mexico. So we tend to say güerito, and it's a phrase we use very endearingly, a güerito, a little white kid, right? So this little güerito here, when does quote unquote foreign or world language instruction tend to begin in the United States? There are exceptions. I'll talk about the exceptions in a moment. Does anybody have any idea? Maybe you can type in the chat, and Juan Carlos, you can let me know. When in the school trajectory, what grade level does world language instruction, when will this little güerito, his name is Julian, by the way, when will Julian begin learning a language other than English?
Middle school or high school, around grade 4 or 5, ninth grade, grade 9.
Okay, thank you. Those of you who said middle school or grades 4 and 5, I love where your heart is at, but that is not where my country is at. And those of you who said ninth grade, that's correct. That is high school. And how old are kids when they are in ninth grade? They're about 14. Yeah. Is that a good time to start learning another language, do you think? Or does it seem a little bit late, right? We know we've got decades of research that suggest, well, that show when you begin learning a language before 8, 9, 10-ish, there's no like magic cutoff birthday, okay? We tend to converge more completely on a native-like system, okay? Now, if you notice, I did not say younger is better, because the psycholinguists get irritated and they throw tomatoes at me when I say that, because it's not entirely the correct way to say it. But I think in practice, it's probably generally fair to say that the younger you are when you begin to have another language, the more likely you are to converge on a native system. So think about when we plant a seed, right? It's like planting a seed when that soil is very fertile. In fact, neurolinguists refer to this as organic memory. When you start learning a new language before this age, it's actually stored in a different part of your brain, is what they have found. And they call it organic memory, okay? It's like the fertile soil. But what did we just say about the United States? Most of us start learning when we're 14, okay? And does anybody know how this sentence ends? I hear this all the time. I studied 3 years of Spanish or French or Chinese or Italian or German in high school. What's the second half of this sentence? Does anybody know the second half of this sentence?
I can't remember a thing, but I don't remember
exactly
anything. But I don't remember anything.
Yep.
I don't remember a thing.
There it is. There it is. Let me ask you, is this because Americans are just stupid? We're just dumb? We're bad language learners overall? Is it because our language teachers stink? We just have bad language programs? If this is true for you or someone you know, I want us to remember it is not our fault. If you studied X years of Spanish in high school and don't remember anything, it is not your fault. It is the system. What we are doing, we are not planting seeds when that soil is fertile. We are trying to plant seeds in a desert, okay? Will some people be able to learn a language really, really well, starting it in high school? Yes, of course. But is that a good national policy? I don't think so, right? I would much rather see us planting those seeds when that soil is super fertile. Now, back in the day, a third of our K through 5 schools and 75% of our 6 through 8 schools did offer language education. Now, whether this world language education was high quality and robust or not is another question. Because I want to tell you, back in 2001, I remember I taught a course on language teaching to children. How do you teach languages to children? Okay. And I remember wonderfully engaged and a group of teachers who really wanted these little kids to learn French and Spanish and Italian, okay? And I would ask them, how many minutes a week do you get to teach these classes? Well, we get 30 minutes a day, 4 times a week. It just wasn't enough. And then I would ask them, what is your curriculum? What do you do in first grade? Well, we really only have time to do colors and numbers and days of the week. Okay, fine. What do you do in second grade? Colors, numbers, days of the week. Really? What about third grade? Guess what they did in third grade? Colors, numbers, days of the week, and the months of the year, right? In part because they don't have enough time, in part because every year new kids were coming in who didn't know anything. So this is not a program designed for strong levels of proficiency, but hey, it was there, it was something, okay? But then No Child Left Behind came along, and that just decimated our language programs, okay? And what I've been able to find recently is that only 19% of K through 12 students on average across the country are in language classes. That's abysmal. Now, it does vary state by state. You can see Wisconsin and New Jersey are doing quite well, okay? And your neighbors over here in Vermont, they're doing quite well. But in general, people are not learning languages here. And now, it is a myth, right? I'm sure you know this is a myth. Some people will tell you, well, in Europe, everybody speaks 9 languages because when you fall out of bed, you're in another country and da-da-da. It's a bit exaggerated. If you've ever been to France or Spain and other places, you know that there's lots and lots of monolinguals, okay? But at the very least, they are studying other languages, okay? And here's the United States, by the way. All right, that's a little embarrassing, okay? I am not sure where Canada is. Maybe in the Q&A we can talk about where you think Canada might be. And when children show up to school here in the United States, we give them a test of their English to see whether they are ELs. We call them ELs, English learners. And that is 10% nationally of children are ELs. Here in Illinois, it's about 12%. And as you would expect in certain parts of the country that border with Mexico, it's a little bit higher, okay? However, kids in grades K through 3, it's 1 in 5. Okay, 20% of kids who show up to school here in the United States speak a language other than English at home. Okay, we could be doing so much better. Okay, oh, and P.S., 76% of them are Spanish speaking. So yes, we are the fifth largest Spanish speaking nation on the planet. Okay, after Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and Spain, we are number 5. But we are losing that Spanish generation after generation. So anyway, I have just described to you 2 problems. I have described the problem that we have lots and lots of speakers of other languages, children who show up to schools, and then we actively neglect those languages. Or actively erase those languages. Then they turn 14 and we're like, okay, now you can study a language. You know, what happened to all those years in between where we could have been developing their home language, right? And then the kids who speak English in the home already, we wait till they're 14 and we say, okay, now you can study a language. And I'm not going to lie to you, despite all the years of research about communicative language teaching and things like that, we still get this, what you see right here. I see you studied Spanish. How fluent are you? I can conjugate AR verbs in 10 tenses. A lot of programs, unfortunately, still are what they call drill and kill. You know what I mean by drill and kill, right? The kinds of classes that we'll talk about, yo voy, tú vas, ella va. And we know that this is not how people learn languages, okay? Now, there's not a lot of things in life that have a sort of magic bullet solution, but these 2 problems share a very potent solution, and that potent solution is called dual language education, okay? And I'd like to tell you, this is exciting because y'all are in Canada, how I first learned about dual language. Some people call it dual immersion, okay? The way that I first learned about dual immersion was because of Canada. I was sitting in my PhD program. I didn't know what I wanted to do for my dissertation. This is confession, okay? It's confession time, y'all. I didn't know what I wanted to study for my dissertation. It was the last class of my last year of my PhD program. I thought they were going to throw me out because I didn't know what I wanted to study for my dissertation. And the professor, it was a class on classroom language learning, okay? And she showed us a video. It was the first week of class. It was a video of children in Canada, and I don't remember what part of Canada they were in. And it was an immersion classroom. And I'll never forget, it's seared into my neurons. She was a little blonde girl. She was probably about 5. And she was sitting there in a class, and the teachers were speaking French all around here. And this kid understood nothing, right? And the lights went on, the angels sang, and I said, oh my God, yes. That is how we can encourage good. I had it in feeling, it just resonated with me. And then I've just sort of spent most of my professional career looking at immersion education. So let me describe to you very quickly how this works in the United States, okay? And I hope it works better in Canada. When a child like Joaquin, this kid's name, if you remember, his name was Joaquin, okay? When he shows up to school and his English is not strong yet, the school gives him a test and they see what his level is. And by law, this is a federal law as of 1973, if his English is not at a particular level, all public schools, any public school that takes federal money, must offer Joaquin some kind of service. They call it a service, okay? Here are the 3 most common types of services that are offered to children who don't speak English yet. The first is a model that only uses English. but they pull these kids out for a certain period of a day for what they call sheltered or supported ESL, which means English as a second language. This is the most common, okay? Door number 2 is what they call bilingual. Now you see I'm using my air quotes. I'm going to tell you why in a moment, okay? This quote unquote bilingual education, as you can see, 25% of the day, that's really small, okay, does use Spanish or Gujarati or Polish, whatever the language is, okay? But look, what do you notice here? It only goes up to grade 3. After 3rd grade, Joaquin is expected to transition into the all English classroom. In fact, it's called transitional bilingual. That's the name of the program, okay? And I have another note here. It says 20 plus. If there are 19 children who speak Gujarati in a public school district, they're getting this. As soon as a 20th child arrives who speaks the same language, who speaks Gujarati at home, in Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Texas, Wisconsin, and Illinois, those school districts in those states must now switch over to this model. I think this is fantastic. So they got to go find a Gujarati teacher and implement this kind of program. Now, why do I sound like I'm being critical and I'm putting it in quotes and things like that? For the following reason. I think it's better than this. But here's the problem. What happens after Joaquin exits this program and he goes to all English? What happens to Joaquin's Spanish? We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. It's like a plant that doesn't get watered anymore. In fact, it's very common for Joaquin to never read a book in Spanish again. To me, that's not bilingual, right? That might be bilingual in its practice. It's not bilingual in its goal. What is the goal of this? The goal of this is for the kid to learn English and be in all English, okay? And then door number 3, of course, is the best one, dual immersion or two-way immersion. It has a number of different names, okay? Check it out. This is 50 to 90% of the day is taught. In my example, I'm going to use Spanish, okay? My kids were in a program where they used 80% Spanish in grades K through 4. And look at this, it goes all the way up through 8th grade. So even after Joaquin's English is strong enough to be in an all English program, they don't kick him out. They keep him in Spanish. And you know what else? Not only, so this is watering the plant, right? Not only is kids who need to learn English like Joaquin in this program, guess what? Julian can be in this program too. So Julian's parents might say, you know what? We don't want to wait till Julian's 14 years old and put him in a yo voy tu vas, ella va Spanish class. We want Julian to really learn Spanish. So we're going to put him in this class. So they're electing a school program where they can't help him with his homework. They don't speak the language. Now, immigrants do this all the time, but these parents have chosen to do this, okay? Now, I mentioned earlier that a lot of Spanish-speaking parents are understandably very concerned about their children's English. So sometimes a school district will see the data that I'm about to show you, okay? And then they will adopt a dual immersion program. And whose parents do you think will be opposed? Will it be Joaquin's parents or Julian's parents? It's usually Joaquin's parents who say, oh, heck no, you put my kid in the all English program, right? So sometimes the school district will invite me to come talk about this, or, if they don't invite me, I show up anyway. And I'll be like, okay, parents, ¿cuál de los 3 programas aquí piensan ustedes que va a resultar en el nivel de inglés más fuerte para sus hijos? So this question right here is what I asked them. And the parents reply, oh, well, the first one, right? The more English they speak to my kid, the more English my kid is going to learn. And I say, you know what? That's really logical. That's a very logical thing to believe. But is it true? Is it true? And I'll show them these data from Houston. And I'll say to them, parents, check it. I want you to look. There's going to be a blue bar here, which is going to be that bilingüe que no es bilingüe, right? The not really bilingual program. And then there's going to be a dual immersion, a yellow bar. This is English reading. You ready? I'll say, okay, parents, which bar is higher, yellow or blue? And they'll go, oh, wow, the yellow bar is higher. And I go, yeah. So this means that children who are studying 50 to 90% of the day in Spanish are reading better in what? In English. And they go, wow, that's weird. I go, I know. And how about writing? Which bar is higher? They go, oh, the yellow. I'm like, yeah. Kids who are studying 50 to 90% of the day in Spanish are writing better in what? In English. And they go, wow, that's weird. I go, I know. But sometimes the answers that are simple are not correct. You want your kid to learn English? Put them in Spanish. And I know it sounds completely counterintuitive, but that's what the data show. And sometimes they look at me like, yeah, no, that can't be right. And I say, okay, all right, fine. Let's leave Texas. Let's go to California. check out this data from California. These kids are in 11th grade. They're 16 years old, okay? They began school as English learners. This group of kids had that English only program, okay? Now they're 16 years old. They're taking their California State English reading test. They didn't do so great, okay? The kids who had that bilingual program, they did a little better. Where do you think the yellow bar is going to be? I say to the parents. Kids who studied 50 to 90% of the day in Spanish, how are they reading in English in 11th grade? They're up here. Now, these are all public school programs. This isn't some fancy pants private, this is the same kids, okay? And if you don't want to believe Texas, you don't want to believe California, I don't know what to tell you because district after district after district finds the same thing. Stanford, North Carolina, El Paso, Portland, dual immersion is superior for language learning and for academic content. Now, you might ask yourself, why? Why are these programs so much better? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. We don't have a whole lot of time because I got to wrap it up here. But there's at least 3 reasons I can think of. The kids don't fall behind. Okay, so if Joaquin does not understand 2 + 2 is 4, it's going to take him a while to catch up. And a lot of those kids don't catch up. But if he learns 2 más 2 son 4, he learned how to add. He knows how to add. He does not have to relearn 2 + 2 is 4 once his English comes in. Does that make sense? I think that's really important. Another reason we talked earlier about those general cognitive advantages to bilingualism that are not super well understood, but maybe that is the rising tide that raises all boats and helps these kids do better. The last reason is kind of my favorite reason, and it's the affective reasons, okay? When Joaquin is in that transitional bilingual program that I talked about, and I put the quotes around it, there's a message that he receives, okay? And it's not directly from the teachers. I work with lots of transitional bilingual ed teachers, and they agree with what I'm about to say. There's this message that Joaquin's Spanish is a barrier. It's a problem, right? The message is kind of like, Joaquin, if you just didn't have that Spanish holding you back, then you could be in the all English program, the regular, right? It's kind of seen as a remedial program that only those kids who speak something else at home have to go do. The regular kids don't have to do. You see, there's this implicit message. On the other hand, if Joaquin is in a classroom where 50 to 90% of the day is taught in Spanish, he's the king during that 50 to 90%. In fact, the little güeritos, the little English-speaking kids turn to Joaquin for help, right? Because he knows what's going on. I want to tell you a quick anecdote because I love this story. I was in North Carolina, and it was week 1 of a dual immersion program. Kindergartners, kindergartners, they're crazy. And they're sitting in a circle, it's circle time, okay? And half the kids don't know any Spanish, and half the kids, Spanish is all they know. And the teacher calls up, it was a little African-American girl, and she calls her up to the front. She's to take out an object from a basket and hold it up and say the shape and say the color. This little girl somehow figures out and she pulls it and she holds it up. She has no idea what's going on. Just like that video in Canada that I saw a million years ago in my PhD program. And the teacher says, and again, apologies to those of you who don't know Spanish, but this is what the little girl felt like. If you don't know Spanish, then the little girl felt like you right now. The teacher said, a ver, fulanita, ¿de qué color es la forma que tienes en la mano? She says nothing. All the little Mexican kids sitting around are jumping up and down. They're going, azul, 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 azul. And so she goes, azul. The teacher goes, muy bien, muy bien. ¿Y qué forma tiene eso que tienes en la mano que es de color azul? And again, the little girl just, nothing. All the kids around her are bouncing up and down. Triángulo, triángulo, triángulo. So she goes, triángulo? The teacher's like, muy bien. And I'm thinking to myself, what would these little Mexican kids, this was day 3 of week 1, day 3 of kindergarten. What would their day 3 of kindergarten be like if they were down the street in a school that was all English and they were made to feel like you don't belong here, you don't fit in, you don't understand anything, right? Very different experience. Now, if you're asking yourself this question, wait a minute, Kim, you just said that it's not good for those Mexican kids to be immersed in a language they don't understand. How come it's okay for that African-American girl to be immersed in a language she doesn't understand? Well, I think you'll agree that they're very different contexts, okay? Is that African-American girl in danger of losing her English? No. Does everybody in that building speak and understand English? Yes, right? It's the different positionality of the language in the larger society that makes those two situations very, very different, okay? So anyway, I think this is part of the reason why these kids do so much better in dual language, and I think it would be better for the English speaking kids too. I'll come back to them. Sometimes I hear parents say, listen, my daughter has an IEP, that's a special education program. She can't be in the dual language program, right? That's another myth. We have to bust that myth, special ed children, and I'd be happy to share this resource with you if you're interested. So my point here is, and I need to wrap up here, instead of No Child Left Behind, which was that educational act that decimated our language programs here in the United States under President Bush, what if no child was left monolingual? What if no child graduated from high school monolingual? That to me that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, right? If we could do that. So I had the great honor to give this TEDx talk back in 2013, No Child Left Monolingual. I just looked the other day, it had 115,000 views. And, I'm not going to lie, I was pretty impressed because, only 100,000 of those were my mother and my students. So, some people out there were getting this message. Oh, I lied. I do have one more thing I want to say to you. We've got 30 years of research on the English of these kids. What about their Spanish? Right? I told you earlier, Spanish is being lost. Remember this granddaughter here? Less than 50% of children like her speak any Spanish at all. So make no mistake, Spanish looks very robust here. We're the 5th largest Spanish speaking, blah, blah, blah. It is being lost intergenerationally. The reason we are number 5 is because people keep coming. And that's a great thing. But it is being lost, and we can't lose sight of that. So I did a project with a graduate student here. We studied all these kids I'm going to tell you about spoke Spanish at home. All of them speak Spanish at home. Some of them, their parents put them in the dual immersion program. Some of the parents put them in the all English program. Here's the school. It's a typical Chicago public school. 84% are low income, 81% are Latino. Okay. We gave them the language assessment scales in Spanish. Here's their listening comprehension. The blue bar is the kids whose parents chose the English program. They did pretty well. If you give them a test that says, Juan Carlos fue al parque y vio 4 perros. ¿Cuántos perros vio Juan Carlos? They go 4, right? They can do that. The dual immersion kids did do a little better, which isn't surprising because they're studying in Spanish all day long. Those differences are big. You know where the differences are even bigger? In the reading. You give them a reading task, and the dual immersion kids do so much better. That makes sense, doesn't it? All these kids are speaking Spanish at home. You know what they're not doing at home? They're not reading in Spanish at home. And the biggest differences of all are in the writing. Let me show you an example. These kids are in 1st grade, okay? So they did preschool, kindergarten. It's now November of their 3rd year in school. School takes place 100% in English for these kids, even though they speak Spanish at home. I asked them to describe this drawing. This kid writes, ellos son comiendo eggs, él está haciendo eggs. Listen, the kid's 6. It's not so bad, okay? It's okay. But look at this kid. Dad making eggs, the kid helped dad. This child's, I can't swear that he's incapable of writing in Spanish, but this is what they produced. And I mean, you saw the averages, they're very low, okay? So this plant, their Spanish plant was not watered, okay? Now let's look at their neighbors. These kids all live in the same neighborhood. And they're across the hall in the 1st grade classroom that teaches in Spanish. Okay, los niños están limpiando y la mamá es tomando chocolate y bueno, se le fue la onda aquí al niño, but I mean, he did a good job, right? El papá está cociendo huevo. Look at this kid. There's not enough lines to contain all the Spanish this child wants to write. Okay, so I think you would agree this Spanish is much more robust. Now, you saw the difference between 1st grade children in all English and 1st grade children in all Spanish. What do you think is going to happen in 5th grade? Those differences are even larger. 5th grade kids who've been studying all these years in English cannot write a coherent paragraph in Spanish. It's difficult to read. Their friends across the hall and who live around the block from them, whose parents put them in Spanish, look at how wonderful their Spanish is. Their Spanish plant got watered, okay? This is a question of, bilingualism versus biliteracy, which is more important, right? So those parents, many parents will say to me, listen, we speak Spanish at home, that is enough. Que la escuela sea puro inglés because Spanish at home is enough. And I say, enough for what? If you want your kids to write like this, then yeah, it's enough. If you want your kids to write like this in Spanish, guess what? You need to put them in the dual program. And then some of them will say, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. That's fine. But what about their English? Que no sufra el inglés, which again, we all understand that. The English scores were exactly the same in my study. Okay. Now you might say to me, wait a minute, you showed us Texas, you showed us California. That yellow bar was way up here. How come your yellow bar is here? I don't know. I didn't come here to lie to you. I came here to show you what I found. Okay. My English scores were not superior, but you know what they're not either? They're not inferior. I can look you in the eye and all those parents in the eye, and I can tell you your children's English will not suffer if you put them in dual language. Okay. In part, it's because of this bilingual advantage that we see. And if you're wondering about my little güerito here, about my little Julian, his English is just as good on his tests as his little friends who go to a different school that's all in English. Plus, he learned Spanish. This kid showed up with zero Spanish, right? Like the little girl I told you about in North Carolina, que no entendía nada. 5th grade, this kid can write, mi actividad favorita es ir al parque. A mí me gusta ir al parque porque... This continues on the back, y'all. You know, there's a lot to say. Okay, very robust Spanish. And in fact, here's a social justice piece I want to bring up. Do you notice that this little white kid, Julian, writes and speaks academic Spanish at a stronger level than this Mexican origin child whose parents put him in all English because they thought it would be better for his English? It was not better for his English, and they threw his Spanish under the bus, right? I think it's very important to get this message out. White parents are having this message. White parents are lined up around the block to get these programs. It's our Latino parents who we need to convince of the benefits of the bilingualism. Do I have time for one final point, Juan Carlos? How are we doing on time? Yeah? Okay. There's something that something that I think is very important to bring up to parents. Remember I said earlier that we are guilty of measuring bilinguals with a monolingual ruler? We do that with our standardized testing. We are testing children, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. We're testing their English and not taking into account their bilingual education program. And yes, I would be dishonest if I didn't say that sometimes there can be periods of time during which it looks like the children in the dual language program, their English vocabulary and syntax might be lower than, not as developed yet as, that of their peers in the all English program. Okay. But the problem is you can't be comparing them when they're 7, 8, 9 years old. I tell parents, your kids are building something much more complex and you need to give them more time. So what I'll often do is I'll talk to them about the 3 little pigs, right? Remember the first little pig, they leave their house and he builds his house out of straw, right? This, friends, is like an ESL program, I tell parents. It goes up quick, but is it strong? Okay. The second little pig builds his house out of what? Out of sticks, wood. Okay. This is like that bilingual program that we talked about, 25% of the day in Spanish or Gujarati or Mandarin. Okay. Now, a mom who has her kid in this program, she looks at her kid's English and she says, oh my gosh, my kid only has walls. And my comadre's kid has the walls and the roof. Oh my gosh, I've made a mistake. What have I done? Let me pull my kid out of here and put them in there. No, I tell her, wait, your child is building something stronger. You need to give that child time, right? Take the long view, okay? What does the third little pig build his house out of? It was bricks, ladrillos, right? This is dual language, dual immersion programs. Now, the mom who has her kid here says, ay, Dios mío, my kid only has the foundation. My neighbor's kid has the walls, right? And the neighbor's comadre's kid has the walls and the roof. Why did I ever listen to that professor lady? I am taking my kid out of here right now and putting him in all English. And I say, no, please, ma'am, don't do that. Give your child time to build. Porque cuando viene el lobo, and here my analogy breaks down. I don't know what the lobo represents, the wolf. Maybe it's heritage language loss, lower academic achievement, right? We need to give those kids time. All the studies show us. We need to get these results out to the parents so that they can make informed decisions about their children's education, okay? Here I have it's a film called Speaking in Tongues. In case you've never seen a kid on their first day. Oh, actually, I don't know if I activated the audio. Can you tell me if you can hear this? Can you hear that? No? No? Okay, shoot. Well, anyway, what I can do, let me stop sharing for one moment and share again
we can also
with the audio. Let's try again. Okay, can you tell me if you can hear it now?
Manchilia Pina, 好冇？啊，我咧小朋友係周先生，咁今年咧我就會係你嘅中文先生嚟嘅，周先生。嚇，咁我哋而家咧會一齊講下早晨先。咁咧，你嚟到個時候咧，如果你熱咧，你可以除咗你件衫，掛喺啲鈎上邊。如果你有眼
Look at their faces. This is like the video I saw in graduate school that I told you about. These kids don't understand a thing, but check out what happens by third grade.
3个，1、2、3，1、2、3，轮流，先抽一个起来以后。
这是不是右手？左手。
This kid is doing grade level math in Mandarin in third grade. And there are other children in the video. One, she's a heritage Chinese child. She's the only one who can talk to her grandmother. All of her cousins, they can't, right? And there's a beautiful scene in there where she's making dumplings with her grandma and they're talking in Mandarin, and the other cousins can't really participate in that. There's a lot of other things I can talk about with the seal of biliteracy, but what I want to conclude with here is that dual immersion makes us better, okay? It improves our family relationships. It gets rid of this problem. I don't remember anything. And it makes us a little more like the rest of the world. Okay. So I think it's probably time for me to end here. Yeah. There's lots of school districts demanding dual language. And, you know, if I had my way, every single kid would be in a dual language program. There's some things we still need to develop our programs that I won't have time to go into. Oh, here's a great note to end on. I think it's wonderful that children are learning new languages. And I thought it was great. I love that Princess Charlotte was speaking 2 languages and she's just 2 years old. That's fantastic. Okay. But we need to also think about the children who have home languages, and we need to develop those. Okay. It's not enough to grow new languages among our majority children. We need to keep the non-English languages among our minority and minoritized children. Okay. So I do have another cool video, but I think I'll stop here. For the interest of time, thank you so much. And maybe we have some questions or thoughts that you'd like to share.
So we're sitting at the top of the hour. So what we would do, you know, is something that we do for fun, Kim, is that we turn the cameras on and we wave. And then I welcome for everyone to stay if you can stay a bit longer, and then we can ask some questions. But some people, I realize, have to go to their next meeting or what have you. So thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Those of you who can stay, I would love to hear your comments about the Canadian context.
Yes. So if anyone has a question, this is the time. And just unmute yourself. You can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I don't know if we have questions. I just want to stay here forever.
Mm.
Yeah, no, yeah, no. We started first chatting, I told you I was fangirling here because like I've been following you for so long, so I'm so happy to be able to finally meet you. Yeah, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ileana is the pronunciation of your name?
Ileana, see.
Ileana. Well,
Ileana.
Thank you for that kind comment. It really is. I'm sure you all feel similarly when there's something that you love and that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
This is like a dose of vitamins. This is like a vitamin injection to just be among a group of people who get it and who care. And y'all are out there, you know, in the trenches making a difference. So this is wonderful for me, and I'm honored to have been here today. Thank you.
Yeah, so I do mention you a lot in my classes. I'm teaching Spanish right now. I taught a lot of English as an additional language, as we call it now. We don't call it ESL anymore. It's just English as an additional language, because we have lots of people that speak several languages, and English is just another language to add to the repertoire. And I do mention a lot of like the things that you say about heritage speakers also, that most of them say, well, I'm not fully bilingual. I can't really speak the language well. Like, well, but you communicate with your grandparents who have all of this and they don't feel confident enough. And it's just trying to encourage them to actually own their language, right?
Yeah.
To own that part of them, because they don't feel that confidence. It's like, well, if I don't speak it, they feel that they have to perfectly know the ins and outs of the language to say, oh, I'm bilingual.
Right. They think they have to have 2 heads, a monolingual,
exactly,
and particularly when they've, when they've made it to the university level, they've got something going on up here, and they've made it usually by virtue
I invited
of
all of my students to, and many of them were here, or some of them were here today, because I wanted also to hear that second part of, well, it's not all grammar, because they are so focused on, oh, I want to have the grammar. It's like, I want the rules. I need to know the rules and the patterns. And it's like, this is what I need to know, right?
And we do that to them, not us here, but the system bullies them. They get bullied. I call it triple bullying. Okay. It's a triple bullying. First off, they get bullied by the hegemonic Anglophone society that very clearly gives them the message, you're in America, speak English. We hear that all the time. Okay. They're not blind to that. They see that. They suffer the effects of that. So they're given the message, Spanish is not wanted here. Number one. Number two, they're bullied by their own Spanish teachers, right? I can't tell you, 25 years at my university, all of them come in and tell me horror stories. It's trauma from their high school Spanish teachers who threw the red pen at them and, criticized their Spanish. And then the third way they get bullied is very sadly by their own families who frequently make fun of them. There's a trend now, if you Google it, no sabo kids, okay? People will make fun of young Latinos or young, old, whatever, for their level of Spanish proficiency, right? So they get these messages from all places, and a lot of them just shut down. They say, okay, fine, I just won't speak it. Why would I speak something I get humiliated for, right? So that ushers in, it's a catalyst for language shift, right? And then those who do have the valor to go in and study it, they've got these pernicious ideas about, it's grammar, right? Try to sign up for Spanish 1. I need to start from the beginning and learn it correctly because I speak it poorly. Like as if they had bad habits that need to be broken or something. And it's very challenging to undo that damage and get them to see the value of what they have. And of course, build on it and grow from there. That's a big challenge. So hats off to you for doing that work. It's very important work, and it does have a ripple.
Any other questions or comments?
Hi there. Thank you, Dr. Potowski. My name is Jessica Chan, and I work with teacher candidates who are preparing to become teachers. And I'm specifically in the British Columbia context. And so there aren't always dual immersion programs. And so we have French immersion programs that are offered, but there's a lot of different languages that are represented in our classrooms. And when we talk about supporting multilingual learners, and honoring their identities and their voices. I was wondering whether it's from your work or kind of your perspective on, how do we kind of support future educators in understanding the importance of, supporting that identity development, whether it's language or cultural identity, but that identity piece, even if they don't themselves speak or understand kind of the importance of the culture and language?
That is a fantastic question. And I think we all probably would sign up if there could be a way. I think about Los Angeles Unified School District with 106 different languages spoken there. Right? It's not all Spanish. How would you, I think we would all agree if we could somehow have some virtual reality where each kid could get dual language instruction in their own language, even if there's only 3 kids who speak whatever it is they're speaking, we would do that. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. So yours is an excellent question. What do we do? How can a teacher who only knows English perhaps support these languages? Not my area of specialty. I wish I knew of a couple of good suggestions. I will tell you something I saw in northern Italy, believe it or not, in a school in Milan. It was a very heavy immigrant receiving school. And what these teachers did was each week they had to learn a phrase. All the children had to learn a phrase in one of the languages spoken by the other children. Now, you might say those kids are not going to remember that. That's not going to do much. I think it goes a long way in positioning all of those languages as important. Ideally, you would have some kind of additional, maybe an hour or 2 a week where the children could be, there's so much stuff on the internet now that wasn't available in the past. Could there be some way, an educationally healthy and useful way, that children could spend a little bit of time each week in a monitored environment in which they were interacting with somebody reading books to them in their language via the internet? I would love to see, I know in Spanish, we have a ton of resources. They have actors like Jaime Camil reading children's books, and they're interactive. They're amazing. I wish they were around when my kids were little, but we have them now. So is there some way we could take advantage of those things to support the learning of those kids? Well, you didn't actually ask about the language, you asked about the identity, but they kind of go hand in hand. So maybe those things might help. Again, I think what we're trying to do is position those children as successful, position their languages as important, and position who they are and what they know as valuable in school and in their lives.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that identity piece is a good grounding place to say, you know, we each have our identities, and how do we help these individual learners flourish in our context? And of course, it'd be wonderful to meet every child where they are and learn about every culture and language. But it's not always possible, but we can make concerted effort to do so. Thank you so much.
Exactly. I once taught advanced English composition in Urbana-Champaign when I was a graduate student. And my students spoke, you know, I think I had 23 students and they spoke 26 languages between them. You know, how was I going to possibly bring in examples and do what I typically do when I teach Spanish, right? So you just got to try to do your best to let each person, like you said, you know, meet them where they are in the best way you can.
Thank you.
I did my undergrad so I'm originally from Venezuela, and I went to the States as a 17-year-old. When I finished high school, I went to university in the States, and I did language training because I was really good at the rules, so I could do any written test really well. Right. I scored really high. I knew the rules. I could not produce language though, and I learned that when I was 17. So I did a heavy English training, and I did my undergrad in the States. And one thing that I was always hesitant to do with my peers who spoke Spanish, who were from my same country and everything, you know, was to speak Spanish outside of our space. And part of it is the age we're at, the message we had received, and being afraid, right? So I did not want to put that attention into me. And then I went back to Venezuela, and I lived in different places. But one thing that I'm really glad that happened with age and with learning things and being in different places, that when we had kids, now I don't care. I'm completely unapologetic. You know, I speak Spanish to my kids or to anyone who speaks Spanish. I don't care, you know, unless, you know, it's being rude, not including people in the conversation or talking behind their backs. But it took me, it was a lot of unlearning. Even if I still don't necessarily feel safe and I still feel the eyes looking at me when I do that, I still do. But it is that positionality and valuing the language and learning to understand that this is me, this is part of who I am, this is part of my identity, and you know, but you have to deal with it. but it's really difficult.
Thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for sharing that story. I have a blog. I'm going to paste it here. And I did not enjoy at all maintaining that blog. In fact, I haven't kept it up. It's cases of public bullying of people who speak a language other than English in public. And P.S., I don't think it increased recently or during the Trump era. I think it always was there, but just now we have the means to capture it. And I can point this out too, you know, as a white lady, you know, I only have one instance of somebody giving me the stink eye, you know, in public for speaking Spanish. My friends who are read as people of color, they get bullied a lot more frequently, right? So this is most definitely a racial issue. This bullying that can happen in public spaces, and I think it's very important. You know, I wouldn't ask people of color to take on that burden. But as a, you know, white person, I think it's important for us to do, you know, those of us who identify that way or who are read that way, to interrupt the space in that way and do that work, because it's safer for us to do so. So let me just give you a really dumb example, but, you know, it's important to me. If I'm in like a part of Chicago's very racially segregated, you may know that. That's due to redlining and lots of historical factors. But if I happen to find myself in a really like white part of the city for whatever reason, you know, and I'm there in the Walgreens or I'm out doing whatever, I will sometimes like, hello? I see, no, pues dime que no sé cuánto. Nobody called me, you know, but I'll just sit there and like interrupt the space, and I get the boom, you know, and I'm like, oh, I wish you would say something. You know what I mean? Like it's just a way to try to do, again, it's just a tiny drop in the bucket. And I don't mean to suggest that it's, you know, more or less important than what lots of other people are doing, you know, but I think it's a way to help, you know, 80% of this country is monolingual in English. And let me tell you, a lot of them like it that way. In fact, they wish it was 100. They get mad when they call people's gas and they hear para español, marque dos. Like that really gets them mad, right? So I think it's important to get this message out. And that is part of the beauty of dual immersion, because these kids are coming through it. And I like to think that when they grow up, they won't get mad when they call people's gas and hear para español, marque dos. That we are changing the future of our country through this kind of education.